Hi, this is Paul Delegro, and welcome to the Business Brains and the Bottom Line podcast. I have a very special guest today, David Bailey. David, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Paul.
Hey, David. So, you and I have known each other for a while, and you're going through a health situation right now that to me is just incredibly inspiring. So let me kind of tee it up for you, not you, obviously, but the people listening. So I get a text from your wife going back several months now, and she says to me, "This is Cheryl, David's wife. He wanted me to reach out to you and let you know that he's in the hospital. He has this immune deficiency disease. He's paralyzed from the neck down. He'll call you when he has a chance." So, yeah, exactly.
Heck of a text.
So once I fell off the chair and got up, I started, and I'll let you talk about that, the disease you have in particular. I Googled it and tried to find out as much as I could. And eventually we got to speaking. So I've been kind of following you, your whole recovery from this, but it's just an incredible story. So Dave, give us a little insight as to like how this thing started and where you're at. Obviously the road, it's a long road back for you and you're not back yet, but you're making a great recovery and your attitude's been great. So, I'll throw it back to you now and kind of give us a little insight as to what's going on in your life.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Paul. So this whole adventure started back in February of this year, where I had, obviously with all the events going on in the world, I had started slowing down. Paul, you know me, I'm a world traveler. I'm a little bit of a workaholic. Last year I flew 267,000 miles and was in 28 countries and started up our APAC division, for the company that I work at. And, obviously things started slowing down as they always do at the first of the year, right? When you're
Right.
in the sales year. And in February, unfortunately for me, I managed to come down with a bad case of flu as well as a case of pneumonia all at the same time. And that took me down for a good solid 2 weeks. I mean, it hit me hard.
Right.
I was, not working. In fact, I tried to go back to work too early and it, kind of had a relapse. And so that was a good 14 days of just kind of being out of the mainstream. For me, Paul, as you know me, 14 days is an absolute killer, right? I'm
Right.
just like,
For
there's
sure.
no way I could take that. So I finally, started recovering from that. And was getting a little bit better, getting a little bit stronger. That was probably, like I said, towards the end of February when that really hit me hard. For a couple weeks, I was feeling pretty good. And in March, after coming down from not being quarantined anymore, so I could see my grandkids, my daughter said, "Yeah, you can come down and see the grandkids." I have two wonderful grandkids, a 2.5-year-old granddaughter named Cambry and a very precocious little 9-month-old grandson named Nolan, also named after a favorite. Well, I don't know if he's named after my favorite baseball player, but cool name, you got to admit. And while I was down there, I managed to come down with a really bad stomach bug and a case of diarrhea that probably I've never had before, like in my life, and really didn't think I was going to recover from that. I mean, it took me out hard. And finally, my wife took me home from Eastern Washington, where my kids live, and took me back home. And I spent 4 days at home trying to recover from that. It turned out to be probably another 2 weeks of recovering from that, and into the March time frame, and started finally feeling myself again. Right, so almost a month worth of illnesses, right, combined with those two. We're getting ready for a remodel. And March 29th, we had moved the last of the boxes. I'll never forget it. We moved the last of the boxes out of the house, out into the garage, so we could do this complete first floor remodel that we've been planning for at least 5-6 years. And I had tweaked my back a little bit. Not, no big deal, right? Figured it was sore from carrying the boxes, that kind of stuff.
Yep. Typical.
Went to bed. My wife was like, hey, why don't you take one of those muscle relaxants, the back doc gave you when you tweak your back, and you can sleep it off, your spine will all fall into place. You'll be good the next morning. 3:30 in the morning, I woke up for the what I call my 3:30 in the morning old man pee, right? That we all have. You know what that's like.
Oh, yeah. Well aware of that one, David.
I couldn't feel my feet. my feet were completely dead. And
Unreal.
I was like, what the heck is going on? And of course, I'd taken that muscle relaxant, and I figured I was just having a bad reaction to muscle relaxant. So, with my wife's help and the help of a dining room chair that happened to be, we were using as an office chair, and the makeshift thing we were doing and living in our basement, I managed to get to the bathroom. And then I said, I can't even get back to the main bedroom. I'm just going to go lay in the guest bedroom, and I'm going to go sleep this off. And that was like, again, that was 3:30 in the morning on a Sunday morning. And the bottom line is that over the period of about the next, I would say the next 10 hours, I progressively got worse. I couldn't feel my knees. I couldn't feel my legs. I couldn't start to feel my midsection. I kept telling her I'm just going to sleep this off. She's asking me if we want to call 911. I'm like, no, I'm going to be good because, I'm a man, and that's just not what you do, right?
Yeah,
I have
right.
muscle relaxant, thing. About 7 o'clock that night on Sunday, I tried to sit up with my elbow. I'll never forget it, to kind of get up out of bed, and I fell out of bed. I haven't fell out of bed since I was a kid.
Yeah.
I crumpled down on top of the nightstand, and Cheryl heard me, and she came and she goes, "Are you okay?" And I go, "I can't feel anything." She goes, "What do you mean you can't feel anything?" I go, "I can't feel anything below my neck. I'm paralyzed." And she goes, "What are you talking about?" And I go, "Just help me get off this nightstand." And she managed to get me laid down. And I'm a big guy, right? I mean, Paul, you know this. I mean, I
Yep.
was over 450 pounds. I don't know how she got me off that nightstand. I used to, I like to say that when I was a kid, I used to kill quarterbacks, as a fun thing, right? So, a lot of muscle, a lot of upper body strength, a lot of lower body strength. But the fact that I couldn't barely lift a finger, to support myself was extremely scary. She managed to get me laid out, put my sweats on, put a shirt on. She goes, "You want me to call 911?" And of course I'm saying, no. I go,
Still saying no, right?
let's say no. I go,
Yeah,
I
unbelievable.
go, "What do we got going on tonight?" And she goes, "Well, I got to get the garbage out." And I said, "Well, go get the garbage out, and then I'll make a decision." So she goes and gets the garbage out and comes back in. She goes, "What do you want to do?" And I go, "Call 911. I can't move. I can't even lift my arms now." So, I'm progressively getting more scared by the moment.
Right.
And she called the fire department. She said, "Bring a couple of engine worth of guys. This is a big guy laying on the floor. You're going to need muscle power." And bring an ambulance. And so they managed to get a pair of, I don't know if it was I don't know if they call them slats still from my old firefighting days. I used to be a volunteer firefighter when I was a kid, or if they just put a tarp underneath. But they managed to get me up onto a stretcher, get me to the emergency room, basically a place called Covington General, which is right next door to our little town here in Maple Valley, Washington. And of course, they start working on me there in the hospital, and they immediately think that I've had a stroke. Kind of makes sense, right? You're paralyzed.
Right. Yeah.
You're a big
Logical.
guy. You've got a family history of heart problems, right? So maybe this guy just had a stroke. So they go through all of it, right? CAT scans, MRI, all kinds of testing, and they can't figure out what's going on. And so they end up admitting me. And this is where, now, I don't know how religious you are, Paul. I was extremely religious when I was a kid because of a mother who started taking me to church when I was 2 years old.
Right.
And, I would say that I'm still, even though I'm not a regular churchgoer, I still believe in the good Lord above. And this is where he started intervening, because one of the first interns I saw when I was upstairs comes in, starts talking to me about the history, talks about what I had gone through since, February, starts putting two and two together. And then you want to talk about divine intervention. She happens to be studying under a neurologist who happens to be the West Coast specialist for the disease that I was diagnosed with.
Wow.
And the disease that I was diagnosed with is a disease that's very hard to detect, it's very hard to diagnose. There are people in the hospital for upwards of a year before they get a diagnosis. There's only about 20,000 cases a year worldwide that have this diagnosis, so leave it to me to get this thing. And the disease is called Guillain-Barré. And trust me, it took me 4 months to say it myself, right?
Well, if you noticed, I didn't even try to pronounce it. I have it here, but I knew I was going to hack at it, so I figured I'd just let you say it.
My wife learned it before I learned it. So she happened to call this Dr. Kruick, who is this neurologist down in Tacoma General Hospital. Tacoma is the second largest city in Washington State, just south of Seattle. And that doctor was on staff. She told her what I was going through, told her the symptoms, and she said, get him down here. They can't do anything for him up there in Covington General. So they put me in an ambulance. They take me to Tacoma General. This doctor is waiting for me in the ICU when I showed up to Tacoma General. I mean, who does that, right? Again, this is where the good Lord's, take.
I didn't know the part about that, the nurse there that was kind of studying that. That's amazing.
Yeah, well, she was an intern actually studying to be a doctor, right? And the doc took a look at me. Now, one of the ways that they can confirm this diagnosis of this disease is by doing a spinal tap. The problem is in doing a spinal tap on a big guy like me, and who's already paralyzed, it's a really dangerous, procedure. She was able to determine right away that I had this without it beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Right.
And she wanted to start immediate treatment. So now I'm in the intensive care unit at Tacoma General. The treatment for this is, well, for me, was 5 rounds of plasmapheresis. So plasmapheresis is like dialysis. And the way they do this is they stick a needle into your carotid artery, right into your neck. And trust me, you don't want to be awake for this. I was. It was like somebody stabbing me, straight through the neck with a knife into that artery, where they run a main line straight into your heart. They also do something called a PICC line, where they run a line into your arm that goes straight into your heart as well, so they can add the drugs like some of the other drugs that they add, at the time, and this kind of stuff. So what plasmapheresis does is it's donated plasma and white blood cells, where they're basically replacing your white blood cells. Because what Guillain-Barré does is it attacks the myelin, which is the protective barrier around your nerve cells, and is the neurotransmitter from your brain to the very tip of your nerve cells to say, go do this action, whether it means moving your fingers or moving your legs or even breathing. Right. I was 2 treatments into this when it started affecting my diaphragm. And they had me on some pretty heavy medication and drugs at the time.
Yep, I'm sure.
I had some interesting hallucinations. I just remember them telling me, Dave, we're going to have to help you with your breathing because you're not breathing well. You're not getting enough oxygen anymore. So we're going to start helping you with your breathing, and we're going to put you to sleep for this. Okay. I figured they're just going to put me to sleep, for the procedure. Well, what the procedure was to put me on a full-blown respirator. Right. So down my throat, put me in a partial coma, right, where I'm knocked out. Sure. And they continued all the treatments, including gamma globulin treatments, while I was on that. And, again, the correlations between my religion and knowing what I know, growing up and this kind of stuff. Here's another one. So I was Christmas Day. Okay. They woke me up and took me off the respirator on Easter Sunday. Okay.
So
now
you
can read that. Yeah. So I was born on Christmas Day in 1965, and they waked me up. I went to the hospital March 29th and going through all this stuff, and they wake me up and pull me off the respirator on Easter Sunday. Now,
that's a couple weeks.
Yeah. It's 14 days on a respirator.
Yeah.
But, being woken up on Resurrection Day was kind of quite interesting. And of course they ask me what day it is. And I tell them, well, it's March 19th. And not realizing that I had lost 2 weeks plus another week in there. And they tell me, no, it's Easter Sunday. And I'm a big, tough guy. And I just broke down crying. I'm like, what's going on with my job? What's going on with my family? What's going on with my friends? what's happening here? And the other problem I was having is learning, they told me that when they pulled me off the respirator, I was having a hard time breathing. And they said I had this condition called a lazy diaphragm, because your diaphragm is just conditioned just to sit back and let the respirator do all the work.
Right.
And that's why with a lot of these COVID patients, they put them on a respirator and they have to wean them off the respirator. By weaning them off them, they slowly stop having the respirator do a lot of the work, right? But that can take up to 3 weeks. For me, they just took me off cold turkey and said, no, you're done, pulled the thing out of my throat, which is, again, another interesting experience you don't want to go through in your life. So for all those COVID patients, been there, done that, know what you went through. I'm still having a hard time breathing on Easter Sunday. And my wife shows up, and I tell her I'm having a hard time breathing. And she stays with me the rest of the day. About halfway through the day, they put me on something called a BiPAP. It's like a fancy CPAP, a lot more pressure, this kind of stuff to help you breathe. I'm still having a hard time breathing with that. My wife leaves, and this nurse who happens to be a former U.S. Army medic and is now an RN, ICU nurse, is watching me that night. And I finally tell him, he thinks I'm having a panic attack. And he asks me, he says, look, you just need to slow your breathing. Kind of stuff. I said, I can't breathe. I said, can you do me a favor and give me a telephone? And he goes, why? I go, because I want to call my wife and say goodbye. I knew I wasn't going to make it through the night. And, because I was only getting like maybe 1 out of every 5 breaths in. I was just struggling. And then I started throwing up, sorry to get graphic, and I was tasting bile in my mouth. And I told the nurse this, and he said, no, you're just throwing up a little clear fluid from all the wetness that was in your lungs because you were humidifying stuff and that kind of thing. And I said, no, I'm tasting bile. And he didn't believe me. And then I threw up again really violently. And he realizes that he's got the heat lamp on and it's the only light in the room. And so he goes and turns, which is this reddish brown light, goes and turns on the main light, and he realizes I've covered in bile from throwing up. So he hits the emergency button in the room. A couple doctors show up. Another nurse shows up, and they decide to do an emergency NG. Now, I already had a nasal gastric tube for feeding and drugs, and they couldn't figure out, they were doing all my drug delivery through that thing, but they couldn't figure out why they couldn't get my blood pressure under control. So they're going to stick another one in. The way they do a nasal gastric tube is they stick a stainless steel tube up your nostril and curve it down through the back of your throat, then run a rubberized tube down through it into your stomach.
That sounds like fun.
The thing about me is they decided to do it in my right nostril, which I have a severely deviated septum. I don't anymore because thanks to them crunching it 3 times and breaking my septum and breaking my nose, they realized they had to go back through the other nostril. The bottom line of this sub-story is that when they got the tube down in my throat, they pulled out 2.5 liters of bile out of my stomach. My stomach was so distended, it was distending up into my diaphragm. And I looked around the room after they pulled all the bile out, and I go, well, I can breathe again. So the reason I couldn't breathe was because all this bile in my stomach. So then they had to figure out what was causing that, and went through a whole bunch of other things and this kind of stuff. And then it hit the pain.
Right.
Pain like you have never felt before. Well, I don't know, maybe you felt it, but I've never felt pain like this before in my life. But it was like somebody was stabbing me with serrated blades that had been heated up to like 2,000 degrees into my legs, into my thighs, into my ankles and my back and my arms. And my wife
got feeling some stuff. Then
she goes, you know what? At least you can feel it again.
Yeah, that's what I just said. At least you could feel something, right? I mean, that's a start.
Yeah, and then they started me on all kinds of pain meds, including a morphine drip and a bunch of different things, again, which gets you hallucinating really bad. And I did that for another week and a half, while I went through a lot of the nerve pain. From there, I went from the ICU. So now I'm 19 days in. I went from the ICU to the critical care unit. I was there a couple of days. And then they moved me over to a rehabilitation hospital called CHI Franciscan. Now, before I tell the story of CHI Franciscan, let me just stop right there. The nurses at Tacoma General were the absolute best. In fact, the reason that I'm not on a permanent trach tube and a permanent feeding tube in my stomach is the nurses prevented the doctors from starting that procedure when I was 2 weeks into the whole thing in the ICU. They wanted to put me in a permanent trach, which,
Right.
cut a hole in your neck, put a
Sure.
permanent trach tube in. Once you go there, you're on that for a minimum of 6 months.
Oh, God.
Right? So they were like, why don't we give it the weekend? They wanted to do this on a Thursday. So let's give it the weekend. He's getting better. He's moving his arms. Yeah, he's on a respirator, but he's responding well. Let's just give it till Monday. What's it going to hurt? And of course, Sunday was Easter Sunday, and they took me off the respirator. The nurses were phenomenal there. And
That's good to hear.
I'm a firm believer that football players should not be paid the millions of dollars. It should be nurses, right? And they should just trade salaries because the work that they do is amazing.
It's a thankless
I'm
job.
transferred to this rehabilitation hospital where most people only stay in this hospital a couple of weeks, 14 days, and sometimes tops 4 weeks. And their whole goal is, now mind you, I show up and the only thing I'm moving is my arms. I'm still not moving my chest. I'm off the respirator and I'm breathing, but I'm not moving my core. I'm not moving my legs. Yeah. And their whole purpose there.
That's about when I started talking to you, David. Because obviously you weren't taking any calls and you were struggling. I got to tell you.
I was struggling. I was struggling really bad.
Yep.
The nurses came in and they did a big eval on me, and I heard them talking in the hallway. Sometimes nurses, and I love the nurses at CHI Franciscan as much as I loved at Tacoma General, but I heard him talking in the hallway and they're like, why is he here? He is paralyzed essentially. He's a quad, right? Why is he here? What can we do for him? And so the head of physical therapy came in and talked to me a couple of days later. Now, mind you, these ladies are having to feed me. Right. They're having to change me. Look, you learn not to be embarrassed about anything when you're 54 years old and people are putting diapers on you and, cleaning your backside and you're completely dependent on these people for everything, right? If you want to roll over, you literally have to roll over, have them come and roll you over onto your side. And it takes 3 of them and they put these wedges and pillows underneath you and you're still in tremendous pain. And, and all you want to be is not there, right? And a lot of people just shut down, from that experience. It just pissed me off.
Yeah. Well, right? Let me interrupt you for a second here, David. So this is where the story gets interesting to me, because every time I spoke to you, you were like, hey, Paulie D, how you doing? You were so upbeat, and you're like, I go, how you doing? Well, I can feel my fingertips today. And it's like, the joke I always said to you is, if this was me, I'd be in the corner in the fetal position, sucking on my thumb, crying. I mean, I'd be crying like a little kid. And you just was so upbeat every time I spoke to you. It was inspirational to me. And that's why I wanted to do this, because to me, this is just a great story of like fighting and success.
Well, I appreciate that, Paul. It was, look, you could go both ways, right? You could curl up in the fetal position and suck your thumb and woe is me and, my life is over and that kind of stuff. That's not how I was raised. When I was in that pain in the hospital before I went to the rehabilitation hospital, which, by the way, my wife is a saint, right? She came to the hospital every day, the entire time I was in ICU and CCU, right? Made this 80-mile round trip, to the hospital between our house and the hospital, and was with there, massaging my feet and rubbing lotion into my hands, but you know what, my wife, and I don't know if you've ever met her, but you probably know that she doesn't put up with complaining, right? and a couple of times she'd be looking at me going, "Suck it up, Buttercup. You can feel the pain. That means things are reactivating, right?" Yeah. So God bless her and God love her. But when I got moved to the rehabilitation center, I couldn't have any visitors because it was a COVID lockdown facility.
Right.
They had no COVID patients. And so I couldn't have visitors whatsoever. In fact, the closest I saw my wife in the first 2 weeks was her standing out in a parking lot, about 100 yards away, waving to me and my crazy sister-in-law waving and that kind of stuff and holding up a sign saying, "We believe in you." And then I got this sign from my nieces and nephews and a bunch of other kids that said, "We believe in you, Uncle Dave, and you can do this," and this kind of thing. And so the head of PT came in, and like I said, I just got pissed off.
Yeah.
And I went the opposite direction, and the head of PT looked at me and she said, so Dave, we need to explain a few things. And I said, look, before you give me the lecture about I need to heal and this is going to take a long time and, this is a bad disease and, you've kind of crossed a threshold in your life. I said, let me just say something to you right now. And she goes, okay. And I go, I'm walking out of here, right? I'm not rolling. I'm not, you're not going to put me in a wheelchair to get me out of here. I am walking out of here. And she goes, well, you need to manage your expectations. And I go, this is me managing my expectations.
Yeah, that's the negative side, right?
Yeah, there's not going to be any negativity. There's just going to be positive, this kind of stuff. Now, my first physical therapy session was with 5 physical therapists who lifted me out of the bed with this crane system called a Hoyer, right, that they had attached to the ceiling in this sling, putting me into a wheelchair and taking me down to the rehab facility that they had, which is second to none, putting me on this table, they call it raising table, lift table, lifts and this kind of stuff. Took 5 of them to transfer me, across this thing called a sliding board sliding board mechanism, which is basically just this big board they stick underneath your ass and they move you across the thing into the thing. And they start doing therapy on me. And, I couldn't really feel a lot during the first 3 or 4 sessions, but after the first week, I started feeling like, oh, okay, I can do this, right? I'm getting more strength in my arms. I'm getting a little more strength in my legs and this kind of stuff. And every week was a new adventure. I had a therapist there who was she was going through her clinicals for getting her PhD, or not PhD, but her doctorate in physical therapy. And I had an OT there who was the sweetest occupational therapist I think I ever met in my life. And these, and I mean, granted, this has something to do with your attitude too, right?
Yeah.
I was looking around all the people in this place, and you could tell they didn't want to be there. They were crying, they were bitching, they were upset, they were trying everything not to be in the physical therapy room, and I'm cracking jokes. Yeah. My main goal is to just have a good time, make sure everybody else had a good time, and that kind of stuff. On my 3rd week, they had fitted me with a full set of leg braces. These are, full-on Forrest Gump leg braces, obviously a little bit more modern, that would lock my knees into place, hyperextend my legs, which hurt like hell. I can't tell you the pain that felt like. And then they were trying to get me into a set of parallel bars to stand me up so that I could start to get weight on my legs and start training my glutes and my quads and my hamstrings that, hey, this was going to be the new normal so I could start walking. And I had a guy there who was one of the techs, and he looks like this scrawny little guy, and he shows me a movie he had on his iPhone of him deadlifting 500 pounds, right? Just amazing. Then he showed me a movie of his buddy who was in the Army. He was also, this guy was a master sergeant in the Army. Showed me a picture of a guy, or a movie of a guy who had both his legs blown off in Fallujah, okay? This guy is doing 300-pound deadlifts from a bench, right? Wow. With no legs, right? And he looks at me and he says, if my buddy can do this with no legs, you can do this with legs, and you can do it with these, what they call KFOs, right? Which stands for like calf, knee, orthotics, right? And this kind of stuff. And the first time I tried to stand, it was just a fiasco. And there was all these little kids trying to help me. I mean, I'm telling you, they were kids, right? I mean, one was like 24, one was 28. I was giving them the sign of the cross and blessing them because I said, how much do you weigh? And one kid was like, oh, I weigh like 140. And I go, okay, well, I'm like 450. So when I fall over you and I kill you, will you please tell your next of kin I apologize, right? Yeah. And they're all laughing and everybody's laughing. Yeah. And we tried it a second time. It didn't work. And I look over at the master sergeant. Now, you got to understand, my dad was in the Navy for 29 years. I grew up a military kid, okay? I looked over at the master sergeant. I said, David, I need a little inspiration here. I need a little military inspiration. Now, you can beep this out, right? You can beep this out, but he got in my ear, and as I'm trying to stand up, he gets right down my ear, and he yells in my ear. He goes, get get your fucking ass up now. And I was like, whoa, and lifted up for the first time. And after that, there was no slowing me down.
Yeah.
3 days later, I was walking in the parallel bars 15 feet. 2 days later, or another day later, I was walking 30 feet. Then it was 90 feet. I got in this thing called a special chairlift where they put the sling on you and they lift you up in this mechanism. And it's really just to take the weight off, but then they can lower the weight limit off of you. And I was only supposed to be doing therapy 5 days a week, but I was going down and volunteering for more therapy because I knew the faster I got stronger, the better I got. So the therapist there said, well, do you want to try to walk across the gym with this thing? I said, sure. And I got to the door of the gym and she said, well, do you just want to walk back to your room? Well, I didn't realize she was joking. And I made David lower the thing and I start walking towards my room. And she comes running after me and she goes, David, I was only kidding. And I go, well, it's too late now. Let's go. So I walked down 3 consecutive hallways. The nurses started seeing what I was doing. I am sweating bullets. All I want to do is lay down. And I'm just not going to give up, right? I had this goal in my mind. I was going to get to my room. I got 10 feet from my room when the physical therapist said, that's enough. You're straining your heart. You're straining yourself. You can't do this. I looked at her. I go, there's only 10 more feet and you're not stopping me now. And she goes, yes, sir. Okay. And I did that final 10 feet. It was a couple of inches a second, but I made it. And then I collapsed into the rig. I said, okay, get me out of this thing. And they laid me down and got me out of my KFOs. They measured that walk. Now, mind you, this is a week from the time they first got me up into those things. I walked 385 feet.
Wow.
And at that point, I knew nothing was going to stop me.
Yeah.
I was just going to keep going. Then it was like, let's get these things off of me. Let me try it without the KFOs. Let me just, let me do this, right?
Yeah.
Now, they were trying to slow me down a little bit, but I was at that facility for 6 weeks where I learned to train myself to walk with the aid of a walker, which I'm still using today. Right. I have a power chair, but I've been doing home PT now for 2 weeks, and I'm now starting to walk with the aid of forearm crutches.
Right.
Without the walker and without the KFOs. And so my goal is to every time my physical therapist come to walk a little bit more. And, I'll just continue to get stronger and, nobody's going to slow me down. It's just, I'm not going to slow down at this point.
So you've been making unbelievable progress going from being in basically a coma on a ventilator, paralyzed from the neck down. You're walking again. Yeah. I mean, you're not in the high hurdles yet, but you're walking again. You're making great progress. So what's the net of this long term? Like where's this going? Like, what are they?
Yeah, so the doctors told me my earliest return to work, obviously I'm on long-term disability right now. My company has been absolutely amazing to us. My company is a company in Seattle called Cumul Incorporated, and I've been working there now 7.5 years. Well, I guess I've been there 7.5 years. I've been long-term disability now, starting my first month. But they've been absolutely amazing to my wife and I, and just really taking really good care of that kind of stuff. The doctors told me and they told me this a month and a half ago, my earliest return to work would be October 31st of this year, possibly even until next year around April timeframe of 2021. Of course, me, I looked at him and went, challenge accepted.
You scoffed at him.
Yeah. So my goal is to get back to work in September. My biggest, my biggest advantage in this whole disease is my enthusiasm and my never say die attitude.
Yeah.
My biggest challenge in this disease is my enthusiasm and my never say die attitude.
Yeah.
Because part of this disease is you get extremely weak, you get extremely weary, from it very, very quickly, right? Yeah. In fact, I use this rule that one of my OT guys trained me on, which is called the rule of 15 spoons, where I imagine my day is a cup with 15 spoons, and every activity that I do that involves me walking or standing up or moving to a new location is one or two of these spoons. And when my spoons are gone, I'm done, right?
Time for bed.
Unfortunately, even though I say 15 spoons, in my head I say I have 30, and then I have days like last Saturday where I probably burned up 40 spoons.
Yeah.
And Saturday or Sunday and Monday were me basically being in bed, three
Yeah.
quarters of the day each day,
Well, you
just
got to
trying
listen to your
to recover.
body, right? You got to listen to your body.
Yeah, and I got to listen to my wife who tells me to slow down, and I've been listening to her for 33 years, so I don't know why I should stop now. But it's tough, Paul.
Yeah.
It's
No.
tough when you've
Well,
been flying
one
around
thing.
the world and doing
Yeah.
all this stuff and knowing that the simple act of getting out of bed and putting your clothes on and trying to use the bathroom or taking a shower,
Sure. The little things.
makes you want to take a nap for 2 hours.
Yeah. So, it's funny. The comeback trail. One of the other benefits for you, as you know, you've mentioned earlier, you're a big man.
Yep.
And from what I understand, you've lost a few pounds during this thing. So I think
Yeah.
that's,
Yeah. It turns out this is not the best weight loss method, but
yeah,
a couple of they weighed me a couple of weeks into the CHI Franciscan Rehabilitation Hospital, and I had dropped 85 pounds. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. Now, obviously, that's a lot of muscle mass and a lot of water in your body, and this kind of stuff. But obviously, I lost a good bit of fat as well in the whole thing.
yeah,
By the time I was working out and this kind of stuff, and by the time I stepped out of CHI Franciscan, I had lost about 107 pounds
yeah,
total through this whole thing, which is a great start, right?
right,
It's a great start to just keep going and that kind of stuff. I haven't lost a lot more in the last, couple weeks since I've been home, but the PT guy explained, you're still building muscle. And so as you build more muscle with all the work that we're doing, you're going to kind of
right.
be at this leeway point, right? Midpoint, but eventually you just keep eating right and eating the way you're doing. And I don't have much choice because I can't build my own meals. So my wife is making sure of it. But
She's
the other thing is that my stomach has shrunk so much from, being a big eater and that kind of stuff. And the reason I was a big eater was I used to lift a lot of weights. I used to do a lot of work. I was
yeah,
always lifting heavy things, right? That kind of stuff. So for me, it was just natural to pound in a lot of calories for all the work I was doing. But then you sit down, you slow down, you're not doing that, and you're pounding those calories, you just start to gain weight, right?
yeah.
I mean, I've never been a
So
small kid. I was
no,
250 pounds when I was in high school, right? And so,
yeah,
to jump up 200 more pounds by the time you hit 54, I don't recommend it.
yeah.
But, I come from a family of big people. In fact, in my family, at least on my dad's side of the family, I'm considered the runt of the litter, right? Yeah,
Well,
so
so if
107 pounds is great.
I think there's some good's going to come out of this, David. I think you're going to, I know you've shared with me your weight goal of where you want to go. And uh, I think you're going to come back better than ever. And I don't know if you'll ever be back to 100% normal. In other words, with all the feeling, may not get all the feeling, but you'll be walking on your own soon. With your attitude, I don't see how you can fail,
Well, the nice
honestly.
thing is for the most part, about 90% of the feeling now is back in the tips of my fingers. So
Okay.
I have the feeling in most of my body. The only point where I don't have feeling is about midway up my feet to my toes. I feel like I'm still wearing, the joke I think I gave you was, I don't know what wise guy pissed off, but I'm wearing concrete shoes, right? And that's
Yeah,
kind
there
of
you
what it
go.
feels like when you're walking. So you learn to walk from your ankles rather than your feet,
Sure.
right?
And what's the prognosis there? Do they have what's the percentage of getting that back? Did they tell you?
They're telling me that I have a 99% chance of getting all my feeling back, but it'll take about a year.
Okay.
So this is a
I,
disease that always starts in the furthest point of your extremity. In this case, my feet,
yeah,
and then goes all the way to your neck. And then your recovery is from your neck down,
right.
and your furthest point of your extremity is like my fingers, which are still a little numb, but not bad, on my feet. So, but I have full dexterity. I can type on a computer, I can type on my iPad, my phone, and that kind of stuff. So that's all working well. And, I've got the use of a power chair, which gets me around,
Yep.
I've got the walker, and now I'm doing the forearm crutches, and, it's, power chair, walker, forearm crutches, turkey trot, 5K, right? May not be
Nice.
year,
You got to
but
do it. I
my
believe you will.
sister-in-law has challenged me to the turkey trot, right? She just didn't name a year. I think she was thinking this year. I'm thinking more like, right?
Well, it's a great story, David. That's why I wanted to have you do this, because we have a lot of friends out there that I think would be interested in your story, because they probably already all have bits and pieces. But I think for me, it was every time I spoke to you, you were like nothing happened. You were so motivating to me that I wanted to share your story, because I think it's a good one.
Well,
Of just that
look,
never say die, keep
yeah, a wise
fighting.
person once told me back when I was a kid. So when I was a kid, I was in a bad car accident. Um, I was thrown to the windshield and run over, which
Nice. Huh?
I don't recommend that either.
Yeah.
When I was in the hospital for a very long time, and I had a person tell me, and this is back before the days of physical therapy and this kind of stuff, but I had a very wise man tell me, never let anybody tell you can't do something, including these nurses and doctors.
Yep.
Don't let them tell you you're not going to be you're going to be in a wheelchair the rest of your life, was what they told me, right? And I learned to walk back then, and I took that same attitude with this, right? I'm not going to let anybody tell me, that I can't do anything. I'm going to. I live by the motto that you set your own path in life,
Yeah.
and it's up to you to set that path and walk on that path. And you don't let anybody tell you you can't walk the path that you've chosen. And
Yeah.
as long as that path is good and righteous and good for you and doesn't hurt anybody else, right? And that kind of stuff, and is a benefit to society as a whole, then walk it, right?
Yeah.
And never let anybody tell you to stop, and never let anybody tell you you can't do it. And so you've got to take that attitude, and you've got to just keep going. Now, I will tell you, there were moments in that hospital, where I had some tears. There were some moments where I was feeling sorry for myself. It can't be positive all the time, but,
Yeah.
I heard my wife tell me to buck it up, buttercup, suck it up, buttercup, and heard the voices in my head from an uncle that I dearly love and who's been departed for a long, long time tell me never give up. And I would just turn around and start all over again. And, you learn to sweat blood when you're trying
Yeah.
to teach yourself to walk again, right? And that kind of stuff. And so,
Yeah, I mean, when you really think about it, I mean, how much choice did you have? I mean, you're a young guy, and you could have just said, like a lot of people would have thrown in the towel, David. A lot of people just said, "Hey, this is,"
can't throw in the towel. Think
and but
about your family, right? I've got 2 great grandkids that I'm going to run
yeah,
after, right? And watch them grow, yeah, never throw in the towel.
you
Just
know,
positive thoughts, and knowing that, the best healing mechanism in your body is this.
yeah. No, I think
Best healing
going
mechanism.
forward in life, I think years from now, we're going to heal ourselves with the mental capacity. There's no doubt that we're just tapping into that, the power of positive thinking and chemical releases in your brain. And well, I'll tell you,
And
David.
don't discount prayer. Don't discount the positive thoughts of people praying for you, and the good Lord above. He answers prayers. He really does, and I don't
Yeah,
discount that at all. Like I said, yeah, I'm not a church going. What do they call that? The Christmas Easter Catholics or something like that.
yeah,
Even though I don't know what I would be called because I was Baptist, but
yeah. They,
it's you never discount that. And I put a lot of firm belief that he's looking after me, and he's sending angels to take care of me. And I wish he would just send an angel down and make it all happen at once, but he puts paths in front of you
yeah,
because you learn from it. And the big lesson that I have learned out of this, Paul, honestly, is that, and you knew me, I think I mentioned this at the beginning of the podcast. I was a world traveler. I was wide open till you see God, then break, right? I was, all over the place, always on a plane. I mean, literally on a plane every other day. Um, the lesson I took out of this is that I've got a beautiful family, and I wasn't spending a lot of time with them. And I got 2 beautiful grandchildren, and I want to watch them grow up.
yep,
And if this is what it took for the good Lord to tell me to slow my ass down and enjoy what I have, then so be it,
yeah.
right? Then so be it.
Well, like I said, there's some unintended benefits of this whole thing, right? I mean, I wouldn't recommend it, but I think a lot of good's coming out of it, David. I really do.
Oh yeah, well, you know me, I'm going to look at the good stuff, right?
Yeah,
I'm not going to look at the bad stuff. You're never going to hear me bitch. right?
Yeah.
Well, my wife maybe hear me bitch a little bit, but then she, of course, suck it up, Mr. Buttercup, right? So
Yeah.
I don't get a lot of sympathy from her. I try to pull a little out, right? And once in a while, she'll give me a little bit, but
She's tough. She's
she's
tough.
tough.
Well, we'll continue to, as you and I talk regularly anyway, David. But I really want to thank you for sharing your story. I think it's a great one, very inspirational, as I've said many times during this podcast. And we'll maybe have you on another few months when you're up doing the high hurdles and you lost another 50 pounds, and we may not even recognize you at that point.
Yeah. Well, if there's anybody that has been affected by this disease and is listening to this, remember there are support groups out there that you can lean to and talk to. If you want to talk to me about what I did and what I felt and what I experienced, right, Paul, you can get, they can reach out to you through email, through your contact information. You can put them in contact
Absolutely.
with me. If you just need someone to talk to someone that has gone through it and been there and you're going through it now, call me, right? I'm more than happy to talk to you and put in a good word and help you through it. But just remember, you can recover from this, right?
Right.
It takes a while. My story is a little unique, right? And how fast I've recovered from it so far and the progress I've made. But I firmly believe that if you take the attitude that I took and the never say die attitude, then you could do the same thing, right?
No,
Again, it's all up here, right?
Yep. I
I believe
completely
it's all
agree.
up there. You can make it happen. So.
Yep. So, all right, David. Well, I guess that's a wrap. I appreciate you coming on, and we'll talk to you soon. And again, David, thank you so much for joining me today. It was a great story. I appreciate you sharing it. I know
Thanks,
a lot of personal stuff out there, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Have a good day.
Wonderful week.